Everybody's got out their procurement plan? Okay. In your procurement plan, there is, the first thing is some general procurement procedures. And you are going to fill in who you are, which SFA you are. And I literally had somebody call me and ask me, what do I put for name of state agency? Louisiana Department of Education. Okay? So everywhere it says School Food Authority, you're going to fill out your School Food Authority. Then, starting on page 3, you are going to list the category of food items, how you intend to purchase it, what evaluation method you are going to use, the contract award type, and contract duration or frequency. These are just samples in here. You do not have to, you can delete these and put your own in. That's how Virginia knew that a lot of people sent us back the sample procurement plan because it still had my samples in there. So you want to put your own in. One of the things that can help you is your procurement tool, where you have each one of your quotes, your micro purchases, your food bids, your formal bids. So, and then it may be broken down by, you might order meats, you might procure meats separately from frozen. However you do it, we just want to know how you do it. We do not want to, we're not trying to tell you how to do it, as long as it meets the requirements. We just want to know how you're doing it. And then, so if you want to do a bottom line or a line item, we don't care. We just want, you're just required to have those procurement procedures. Software. We get that question all the time because we're going to purchase this software in 1 year, but then the next year we're going to have to pay maintenance fees or upgrade fees. And so we want the original procurement on your procurement plan, but you're going to note, because one of the things that's been real helpful for Virginia and for us, because y'all know at the beginning of the year we fight to get the online application in, and sometimes I think some of those numbers come from imaginary places. And so her doing the procurement tool and matching it to the income and expense report online helps us and helps her understand if she's got everything there. But it also may make people more accurate in doing their income and expense report instead of just plugging in numbers. Does anybody do any cost reimbursable contracts? Okay. So your software, and you'll put your maintenance fee in, but then in the comment you can say procured in X year. She's just trying to get she's trying to balance out how much that total is. So when we're talking about a formal bid, if you'll go to page 5, most of your formal bids are going to be on the basis of a centralized school system. So, and then number 10 is making sure you do that cost price analysis, so you know which type of procurement you need to do. And then it goes into when you use the formal procurement method. So we've talked about IFPs, and RFPs. Oops. Ad nauseum, I'm sure. So we're not going to go into that. But you are going to put in your procurement plan whether you're going to use an invitation for bid or an RFP. Okay? So you're going to denote that early on. Then you have to announce your invitation for bid or request for proposal. So it has to be announced in ways that do not restrict free and open competition. You have to utilize more than one announcement method to reach the widest possible audience. Remember, we're embracing competition. Direct mailings, or doing direct mailings only, limits competition. It is great to do direct mailings, or direct emails would be what it really is, to people that you know, vendors that you know might participate, but don't limit that to just direct mailings. So you've got regional newspapers, you've got trade periodicals, you've got procurement websites, and again, you've got direct mailings. In your advertisement, it must contain the general description of items that you're going to purchase, deadline for submitting questions, date of pre-bid meeting if you're going to have one, and whether attendance is required or not, deadline for submission of sealed bids or proposals, and the address of the location where the complete specifications can be obtained. Advertising the bid. As you know, USDA tends to talk in generalities, and we don't say require a lot, we say recommend a lot. And a lot of people have been wanting to know, well, how many quotes am I required to get? How many of this am I required to do? And so we went and looked at our state guidelines. And this is what our state statute says. And remember, we follow Revised Statute 38, that it has to be published twice in a newspaper in the locality. Your first advertisement must be at least 15 days before the bid opening. And you can use electronic media, but you cannot use it as your only means. It still has to be published in the newspaper in that locality.
When you say electronic media, you mean like NOAA.com putting on the website? Like, what do you mean?
Or the bid websites. Okay, in your procurement plan, starting on page 5 and going to page 6, and I think even 7, there is a whole host of things that you have to put into your formal bid. And what I want you to do is to, as you're doing your procurement plan, you fill in what your contract period is going to be. What all of these are going to be. I'm not going to read them off to you. So, one of the things that Virginia started talking about was piggybacking. And piggybacking, I think, is a wonderful thing. The problem with piggybacking is you can't do it after the fact. When you're procuring, it is nice to put in a piggybacking provision, particularly if you're a large SFA. And what USDA says is that you either have to put a dollar value on the amount that can be piggybacked, or you have to put in the number of different SFAs that could be piggyback off of you. Well, I don't know about you, but I have enough to do. I would not want to have to keep up with what somebody else is purchasing to piggyback. So I would rather keep up with the number of people. Emily, you put 10 or 15 in yours? 10. So East Baton Rouge is allowing 10 different SFAs to piggyback off of her, and she has good volume. So it helps out the smaller SFAs when we have big SFAs that are willing to do that.
10 districts, as long as all 3 parties agree. I didn't finish that.
Yep.
The vendor and the district.
Yeah, you can't just piggyback off of them without asking them first. And that, again, does not negate your responsibility as an SFA to make sure that everything is done correctly. Okay, if you're going to do a commodity processing bid, and Virginia talked about this earlier, that you have to designate what your value pass-through method is. You have to have a provision for information for bid responses for food call procedures. You want to have a requirement in there that the vendor provides contact information for 2 people, a contact person and a backup contact person for handling food recalls. And then you want to provide them with your contact information and a backup person for food recalls. These are some additional requirements if you're going to do a cost reimbursable. And these would be copied. Nobody's doing cost reimbursable, so we're not going to go through them. Remember, we talked our RP, and it's awarded to the person who's both responsive and most advantageous to the SFA, with price being a primary factor. Okay, this is, and you have a sample in here. Van, you're probably pretty familiar with this, is a sample. It's just a sample proposal card where you fill in the number of possible points, the number of points that each vendor received, and the justification for scoring. And the first 2, I try to make, when I put together proposal cards, try to make things as objective as possible. So I followed a matrix that another system was using for cost, and so that it's more objective than subjective. But then in every RFP, you're going to have some subjective information. So, but the possible points should total up to 100%, and then you want to put points received by vendor and your justification. Here is where I find it very, very weak, is the justification for scoring. In that you have to, if you're going to use evaluation criteria, then you must provide reasoning for giving, I think Virginia used the example earlier, of giving one food vendor 15 points and one food vendor 0 points, and with no justification. There has to be something that they have provided you in writing that you can use for justification. If they have the same point, if you're evaluating on their point of service system, you want, and 2 people are going to provide you the same point of service system, you can't score them differently. You got to give them the same score. So you have to think about that. And I send these back with food service management contracts all the time, don't I, Van, for more justification, because that's what USDA is looking at me for, is to make sure. And so it follows the same line for RFPs, is that you've got to provide ample justification. Okay? For the most part, for food, people are going to use IFBs. If you're doing a cooperative bid, remember, and Virginia talked about this earlier, if you are using a co-op bid, each SFA is responsible for making sure that that contract follows the regulations. You can't say, well, I didn't write it. It's your responsibility to make sure that the contract follows the requirements. Yes, ma'am?
Just for clarification, when is the phone used?
If you're doing an RFP, a request for proposal, where you're using evaluation factors, you may have never used an RFP. You may always use an IFB because you just base it on price. if you're gonna base it on anything but price, now, we've had this problem with state contracts and us not being able to utilize them, right? So, a way that an RFP might be utilized is in like a chemical company, where the chemical companies have to come and refill and service your dish machine. Not that anybody has a dish machine anymore. Or they service the pot and pan sink and do. You might want to use an RFP where price is not the only factor. Because as we know in any service itself makes a big difference. So you might want to use it in that case. Again, pest control. How good a job they're doing. You can use past performance as a criteria. But are you getting my drift, particularly about the chemicals? You can't say you have to put your chemical machines where they meet the holes that I've already got. But I can score you on how good your service is. So that is where an RFP comes in handy. One of these RFP comes in handy.
Is this the new, I see some of the new criteria on there that I haven't necessarily seen in previous samples, like the employee training program or references, is that?
This is for any proposal. It's not food service management company. Food service management company is the same.
Okay.
It was just we were trying to come up with.
And you don't have to use this exact one if you're doing your own RFP for something.
Right, yeah, you can put in a RFP for procurement, they can put anything. It's not tied, it's not locked down like food service management company
Like
is.
SFS PAC, who has the educational module component attached to it.
Say what now?
For instance, we use SFS PAC for chemicals, for dishwashing and other all-purpose cleaners. But they have the HACCP and the educational module attached to their whole bid, their whole service.
So that might be one you would want to put educational materials and the type of training provided. Yeah, and you could, again, that's a subjective thing. You can look at their educational materials and see what they have to offer, and use that in your scoring. Okay. The next several pages are the contract provisions that have to go into every formal bid. Now you notice that last year we told you that things like rights to inventions and contract work hours did not have to be included because they were for construction contracts. So before I put this sample procurement plan together, I contacted USDA again after they had told me in a procurement training that no, they were not applicable, we didn't have to use them, and they were unwilling to put that in writing. So I put them back in. It's just words on a page. So I did put the ones that do not seem pertinent. I did put I put them back in. I think it was the Davis, was it Davis-Bacon Act? Yeah, that was one of them.
What page?
It's like several pages.
Oh, yeah, we see it.
These are all, it will be posted in a Word document on the CMP website, so the procurement plan will, so that you can work in it. But when it comes to this section, just copy it. Now when you get over to starts on page 9 and goes to page 10, is the Buy American provision. And I know you've heard a lot about the Buy American provision. So I'm skipping a lot, so we'll.
Back in the plan?
Page 9. Okay. It starts the Buy American provision. Now, what we've done this year is just, everybody's been okay with having the Buy American provision in their document. But what we found is that our SFAs are really not managing that aspect of the contract. So what we've done in order to assure that we are in compliance with the USDA requirements is that we have added a form. It's a Buy American certification form developed by Miss Emily Hartman. It's in the back of your document, where anything that the vendor is going to provide you that is not American grown or processed, they have to document and send back with their bid. If they do not send it back with their bid, then their bid is considered to be non-responsive.
So we have less of these and more of these.
Do what?
I'm just talking out of
You misbehaving, Terry. So the vendor's going to say, he's going to check that all of his food products are bid and are 100% produced in America and processed in America. I would say that will seldom, if ever, happen. And you can this document can be copy pasted. You can add more. You can cut some out. We don't, just as long as this information is here. Now you can have the you can have it where we were looking at that. Virginia and I are both early morning people. So we were both up here at 6:30 this morning, and we were looking at the agricultural market index, and we were looking at we were looking at, what were we looking at? From some fruits, and the variances in the price between American grown and foreign grown. And I said, the problem with that is that they say that if it's significantly higher than the non-domestic product, you can use it. Well, what's significantly higher? To me, I'm a little tight. So significantly higher may mean something different to me than does to you. So you are the one that has to make that determination as to what is significantly higher. So, but with their bid, any product, and you should have a long list of items that are not American grown. If you don't, I'd seriously question. Emily?
No. Well, like our food bids, we do, not all of our food is on one bid.
Right.
Excuse me. So if it's dry goods, spices are usually foreign. So on the dry food bids, you might have several spices and maybe, something else, a few things. But that's not, the whole thing's not built up. But now if I combine all my food bids, then yes, there would be a number of them.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people do their food bids separately.
So you just keep it in categories.
We do. Now,
Yeah.
not everybody does.
Again, totally up to you how you do it.
Right, exactly.
Somebody like Melissa over here, she's trying to get enough to get an order delivered to her. So she's going to combine all of her stuff together just so and she's probably going to have to order once every 2 weeks to get anybody to come out and see her. That's the reality of it. So we've got to include that Buy American provision. In addition, you need to have you need to notify the vendor in your solicitation that there things happen after a bid is awarded. For example, the oranges, from the Florida oranges this year, the crop was wiped out. Okay, so a vendor bid Florida oranges, and now they can't get them. That does happen. So what are you going to do now? I've bid Florida oranges, and that's what's on my bid. What has to happen is that the vendor has to request in writing at least 14 days before, which probably wouldn't happen in instance of a hurricane. You're not going to get 14 days warning, but in at least 14 days in advance that this product is not available, and then still provide you that same Buy American information. You know, because the price is this, or and what they're going to have to do. You make the final determination as to whether you're going to accept that. You could make a decision not to put oranges on the menu. That could be the decision you make. But the biggest thing is to document. Document, document. Okay. So, Buy American continues on to page 11 of the procurement plan. Again, all of these requirements are in your procurement sample plan. So copy and paste them all in. Okay. Now go over to page 13. And that's where we start on small purchases, small procurements. And some of this is duplicate information from earlier, but I just want to make sure you have this information. We talked about this, that you must have written specifications and clear and accurate descriptions. So that 3 phone quotes and a buy is pretty much gone, right? We were talking, and we've talked about this as well. How many of you do know what your LEA's small purchase threshold is? Same as the state?
No, ours is less.
Huh?
Ours is 20.
Yours is 20?
Yeah.
Okay, so her small purchase threshold is at 20. So anything above 20, she's going to have to go to formal bids. Okay, so you want to know the answer to this question. What, if any, and it may not, it may follow the state threshold. So, but you want to make sure that you know. So you want to write those specifications, clear and accurate descriptions, Buy American, obtain price quotes from at least 3 responsible and responsive vendors. And Marsha's back there laughing at me. Because what 3 vendors? Actually, how many of you have 3 vendors that you can actually go to for produce?
Fresh produce? Yeah. They're not gonna respond.
Okay.
Go to them, but one's gonna respond, the other ones that say no bid.
Well, in truthful, we know that USDA expects that, and I've checked this out with my boss, and USDA expects us. Well, then you're just going to have to rebid because you need to you're doing something wrong. Well, that's not always the case. There are some other things that you can do. There is a parish in North Louisiana that has doing some contracting with a grocery store chain to provide her produce. And produce is a big one where it's very difficult to obtain more than one. There's a corner on the market. I think everybody would agree. So, but you have to be able to make sure if you have contacted people and you got that no bid back, that you keep that as documentation, and try to seek some maybe a little bit crazy methods of procuring it when you only get one bid. But then there's times when you get no bid. So we got to really get creative. Okay, responsive and responsible. I'm trying to skip as much as I can. This is what USDA says. State agency must determine whether in their judgment free and open competition has occurred. And that's what Virginia's doing on the procurement review. So be thinking, I've got to have some documentation to provide to Virginia on why I only had one source of a bid. Okay, micro purchases is on page 14. And we talked about it a lot. If you have schools that you are purchasing, that there are, I know Marcia probably has some schools that only have a Dollar General in their little town, or a Family Dollar. And so if they run out of bread, they've got to run down to the dollar store and pick up bread. Put that in your procurement plan and plan for it. And so maybe for emergency purchases, I mean, there are literally towns that only have a dollar store.
Right.
So if Franklinton, and Franklin has more than that, but if they have, do what?
Pine doesn't.
So what does Pine have?
Pine has a Dollar General.
Okay, so if Pine has a Dollar General and that's all that they have, we don't expect a manager to drive 40 miles to go pick up bread. So in another school in Franklinton, if her emergency vendor for picking up those kind of things is, you said Franklinton doesn't have a Walmart, huh?
No.
Okay, so you may want to choose, what's another? Winn-Dixie, okay, that Winn-Dixie. So there is where you're spreading equitably amongst providers. And that's how you kind of get around. So, because what Virginia's going to be looking at, she's going to say, well, yeah, they got some from Winn-Dixie, they got some from Dollar General. She's not looking to see, well, did this school go to this vendor this time and this vendor this time? She's looking at your SFA as a whole. Non-competitive proposal. You've got to be able to prove that it's available only from a single source. When the award of a contract is not feasible under small purchase, sealed bid, or competitive negotiation. This is very seldom, if ever, used in federal procurement. The only time that you would use non-competitive is in an emergency situation. And one of the things that I get calls on all the time is repairs. And how can I competitively procure repairs? Because I don't have this crystal ball and I don't know what's going to go out. Most of the time, there's one person that works on most of your equipment, right? You can competitively procure the labor per hour for those people. You can't competitively procure a compressor just in case it goes out, or whatever, a fan motor. But you can competitively procure the labor. And so if this company's going to charge me $75 an hour, this one's going to charge me $100 an hour, then you may want to go with the one at $75. Unless he came out, messed up my freezer the last time he came out. So in that case, I might want to use an RFP. Then I can use service capability as an evaluation factor. So you want to look at all of those things when it's not just a matter of writing down. I want you to give some thought to what you're going to use, what type of method you're going to use for procurement.
So with that, companies that might send you a letter saying that they are a sole source or saying.
Do what?
There are some companies who will provide you with a letter or a statement stating that they are a sole source. We're not to accept that per se, right?
No. I mean, you would have to determine whether they're sole source. And I would use that very cautiously and try to come up again with some creative ways that you could do it. When you are making a decision about, when you get one response, USDA says you are to look to see if your procurement is too restrictive, Are you limiting the number of companies that are willing to respond? Would a different description of the product or service specifications yield more than one offer? Some cases that might be yes, in some cases that might be no. Okay, so you want to have a plan for your emergency needs. That's on page 16. You can use piggybacking if the SFA you're piggybacking off of will allow it. And so you have to have permission from the SFA and from the vendor. Everything has to be in writing when you're piggybacking. And you may just have to go out, if your freezer is not working and one guy can get to you this afternoon and the other three you call can't get to you till day after tomorrow, guess which one I'm picking? And you just document that was an emergency purchase. That was an emergency procurement. So you see, this is basically you're building your procurement plan, and we're providing you the sample, and all you have to do is fill in what you personally want to use. And this will fulfill the requirement for your procurement procedures. But I don't want you to just turn in the sample. I want you to really give it some thought and how you really want to procure and what is the most successful way to procure. I have tried, the very last part of this procurement plan is the independent price determination certificate. And that is not in 2 CFR 200. It is in another regulation. And I emailed USDA to try to find out if that was required. Emily Hartman had asked me that question a while back. And they have not responded. So I'm leaving it in until I get an answer. Then you have your suspension and debarment certification, your lobbying certification. I put in here a sample request for proposal. Again, remember, these are all samples. And then the Buy American Provision certification. This will be put up on the website probably after next week because I want to, y'all are our guinea pigs. This is the first time we've done this training, and so we want to make sure that we have everything in order before we put it up on the website. And I believe that it's going to be up on the Fit Kids website as well. All of this training. Yeah. Yes. So you can go any place you want to get it.
I just had a question about this plan and if it differs in any way if you're working with like a private school or a nonprofit organization or a state agency, or is this blanket?
Are you using federal funds?
No.
Yeah, they should.
Wait. Sorry. In
Is
any
this-
procurement process.
If federal funds are being used,
Yes.
then for every dollar of federal funds being used, the procurement process has to happen.
Okay. And
If
the
you're
plan should
using-
look exactly the same regardless of what type of SFA you are.
It wouldn't look exactly the same. Everything is,
Well,
I mean, you want to tailor it to,
tailor it to yourself, but
Right,
you're
right.
following the same format.
right.
Yes. Okay.
And you can do, I did a part of a corrective action plan for SFA a couple weeks ago was that they had to update the procurement plan because they had sent in the sample. And so she didn't do any formal procurement. Everything was under $30,000, and so she did small quotes. I mean, this is a really small school. And so we didn't have to leave all that other stuff in there. And we just took it out. So she had a 5-page procurement plan. She didn't have this real long thing. So it's different for every SFA. Does this make sense to everybody now? Is it helpful? Are we confusing things?
No.
No, this is great.
This is great. My only concern.
Go ahead.
Here, I guess, is that tool that we're gonna have to complete, it's only done when you are saying that you're coming to do the review, or do we do it at the beginning of the year, or do we do it at that time before you come the month before? The tool where you put in all of the purchases and you flip from tab to tab and put in micro, small?
You can do that anytime after the finish of that school year. So you could do that at the same time you're doing your online application, because you're looking at the same documents to be able, or I would think you would be. You'd be looking at your general ledgers, and so you're going to be filling out your income and expense reports. You're going to be filling out your procurement tool, and so a lot of that information should be the same. And that's what I'm telling you that Virginia's looking at, is she's looking at this procurement tool and what was put in, and then she's going to the general ledger and also to the income and expense report to see that there's some fluidity and that they're somewhat the same, or not exactly the same. We know they're not going to be exactly the same, but we see some that are hundreds of thousands of dollars off, and it's like Courtney's onion. Y'all have heard Courtney talk about her onion? Is that when you when I do one layer of the onion and I'm having problems with that layer, then we got to keep peeling back that onion, and so it gets a little more hairy when you have to go and look at everything. So just
But-
make sure you.
One thing I want to say, and I don't think it was really clear, you do not fill out the procurement tool every year. You're only going to fill out the procurement tool the year that you are reviewed. Yeah, I didn't think you heard that part.
Oh, I did.
Yeah, you only fill out that procurement tool
When you're reviewing.
when you're
Very
reviewed.
unlikely that you guys will be reviewing audits, because we need some time for this to close out in May and June. I mean,
Now, I
it's
couldn't.
very unlikely that you'll be reviewing any district in the month of August.
Highly unlikely.
Highly unlikely. But by that time, we will have sent the procurement, the request for you to fill out the procurement tool.
Okay.
You will already have that request, but we won't be finalizing any procurement reviews in August.
To compile, the end of the year.
Right. Right. We're scheduled for a break.